If you're heading to a game or an event downtown, make it a staycation. Call the Wall. 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rate. Some blackout dates may apply. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price. Grace Sass, Hitting Switches, Conducting Thing. Big show coming up. All brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Nissan in Richmond has the award-winning 2023 Nissan Rogue. 24-month lease, 0% on select trims, or need something a little bit snugger, a little smaller? Nissan Qashqai can get you around town very nicely. 36-month financing at 2.99%. All at Applewood Nissan in the Richmond Auto Mall. It's all good at Applewood.
Poll question today: what is more upsetting about Elias Pettersson lately? His play, his unwillingness to sign, or nothing? You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter and YouTube. And just before we get into the poll question, our top story, Blake, and look back at a fourth consecutive Canucks loss to the Seattle Kraken. We had a marvelous time at Greta last night for our watch party with Canucks Army. Shout out and thank you to Casey Grable and his staff there at Greta. Thank you to David Quadrelli and Harmon Dial for doing all the heavy lifting. I had no responsibilities. I just had to show up, eat, drink, and be merry.
Yeah, and
those are the sort of the parties I like.
You did that in spades.
Mm-hmm. And thank you to all the Sekeres Price listeners who came out, especially those who came on up and introduced themselves. Gray, Paris, Raymond, Adam, the former Bath guy, who's at a lot of our events. Thank you, Adam. Mike, Luke, Zara, Len, Aki, and Ali from Gray Clips. And then my friend Rob Ronning, a longtime Sekeres Price listener who comes
Was
up.
he there?
He was there.
I didn't notice him.
Who comes up to me and goes, "Oh, really like that Grady." And I go, "Yeah, me too." He goes, "And Matty, I got to tell you, really like it when he chimes on the show too."
It's offside. It's offside.
So within 10 minutes of hitting the party, Grady with the inflated head, because Rob had built him on up.
Yeah, we can't be just for further.
We can't undo that.
For further reference, folks, your power ranking, the listener, we keep a listener power rankings.
Absolutely.
You don't know about it. We don't make it public.
Absolutely.
You will fall precipitously with those kinds of takes.
For sure.
So,
for sure.
Yeah.
You want to win a contest around here? No, I'm kidding. They're random draws, of course. Okay. Poll question. So look, slumps happen, and Elias Pettersson is pointless in 3 of 4 and 4 of 6. Can live with that. I mean, can also live with his unwillingness to sign. He gets to make that call. It's his decision. Now, it would be helpful from a team building standpoint if he did sign by the March 8th trade deadline. And it's not just the Canucks want to know what they're going to be paying him next year, but also that may invigor or lead them down different paths in terms of acquisitions.
Sure.
If they know Elias is only going to be here for a short period of time, that might push them to be even more aggressive than they already have if he's signing the long-term deal. And of course, if he's not signed, anyways, there are advantages gained if he makes this decision and signs this extension by the trade deadline or with enough time for Alvin and Rutherford to accommodate it and roll out deadline plans. But again, it's his purview if he doesn't want to. I guess the frustration, and I completely understand it from Canucks fans, finally, there is a team worthy of a talent like Elias Pettersson. And yet still that has not been enough through 3/4 of this schedule to entice him to put pen to paper.
Yeah. I mean, and people are going to be accused of being Chicken Little if they bring up the possibility of a departure. And yet there's numerous examples, of course, of guys like, Tkachuk, Matthew Tkachuk in Calgary and Pierre-Luc Dubois who have forced their way out. Despite the fact they had club control still over top of them. So it's not without recent precedent to have at least a level of concern, or at least it explains why the Canucks would want this done sooner rather than later. So as you said, they've got not only the peace of mind, but the ability to then conduct business.
Right.
What if he forces them into a bridge deal? It's a 3-year bridge deal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then they're going to operate differently with regards to the cap over the medium term, right? So it does.
If not at the deadline where they go, oh, we only have this guy for a few years, and that means we're going to put even more eggs in this year's basket. So, yeah, there's There's a lot that needs to happen with Elias. Number one, get out of the slump. That's fine. Number two, he's really, like a lot of Canucks, has to prove he's a playoff performer here, or show it in the playoffs.
And more coming on that from Rick Tocchet from last night. Yeah.
And then, of course, the extension itself. One would think, one would hope.
By the way,
but I completely understand Canuck Nation being a little uneasy about this at this stage.
Nick on the YouTube feed, Quads is old enough to get into Greta. It's a really good point, Nick. It's
incredible.
It's astute, and special dispensation was given.
It's a young crowd there at Greta, and even with that, David might have been the youngest looking.
Yes,
at the party.
Yeah,
but he beat Harmon in basketball, and he was so proud about that. He took to the PA to announce it.
It's good. It's good.
Frankly, I would have done the same if it was at a golf simulator and I beat you. Ladies and gentlemen, I've beaten Dad. Okay, he's in the corner licking his wound. He may be up for a cocktail. Make it a stiff one. Let's get to our top story. Slump. The Vancouver
top story brought to you by Mr. Lube.
Of course, by Mr. Lube. Slump. The Canucks have not only lost 3 in a row for the first time all year, they've now lost 4 in a row. And this one was really stinky. We'll get into Tocchet's comments, and we'll hear from Connor Garland here as well. But 5-2 to your would-be Natural Geographic rival. Your goals come really on some lucky breaks, right?
Mm-hmm.
You put just the 21 shots on goal against a backup goaltender who hasn't played a lot over the last few months. And your goaltending was a little iffy on the other end. That said, regulation losses last night for Florida, Dallas, and Vegas. So your closest pursuer in the division and in the conference, no blood there. No blood with Florida either, although Boston gets the loser point in Calgary and moves into a standings points tie with the Canucks. They have retaken first overall by virtue of the game in hand. Of course, the Bruins are here 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock start on Saturday. And as we talked about on yesterday's program, if you lose this one without any points, then Edmonton, if they were to win their 6 games in hand, would draw even with you on points. Vancouver would probably still have a tiebreaker regulation wins-wise, and of course they have the head-to-head over Edmonton in the season series.
Now, this was put out on Twitter at Hughes for Norris. This might shock you. A list of teams, top teams that have lost 4 in a row this season. You know, the Bruins have lost 4 in a row twice this season. Now, some of those were managed losses, and this goes for a lot of the teams on this list. And Bruins just lost 4 in a row last week. But
therein lies the problem, Blake, is these are regulation losses for the Canucks. They are not.
But still, Bruins have got 2 4-game losing streaks this season. The Rangers, the Panthers, the Stars, the Avalanche, the Jets, the Hurricanes, the Leafs have done it twice, and the Golden Knights have all lost 4 games in a row.
The 4-game losing streak is not irregular. The going this deep into the season without a 3 or 4-game losing streak is irregular.
Yeah.
So the Canucks were on the wrong side of the law of averages here.
Yeah, it was bound to happen.
A long 82-game haul.
The most disappointing part about this 4-game losing streak is last night's game. It was not well played. They got worse.
The worst of the lot. I mean, as bad as the third period was against Minnesota, that was the worst period of the trip.
And that is our top story, brought to you by Mr. Lube, 100% Canadian. Warranty-approved oil changes. And now, not only are they the pioneers of the no-appointment oil change, you can now get tire service and sales also with no appointments. It's perfect for people like me who do not plan for these things. 16 locations in the Lower Mainland. For one near you, go to MrLube.
Not a lot of planning.
Too much going on.
Oh, he's an on-the-fly guy.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Coach Tocchet. And we've got a little bit of a theme here with these first couple of clips. See if you can pick it out.
It's not just leadership. You're looking for everybody. I don't care who you are. Just worry about your game. Now, everybody's capable of doing things, but are we willing to do it? Right now, there's some games that are, and I don't want to, like I said, I thought we played good in Colorado. Minnesota, whatever, 5-4, 3-on-2s, whatever, 5-on-3s. So it's not been horrible. I don't want to go crazy because of this game, but we've had some 4 or 5 guys or no shows here at 4 or 5 games. They got to pick it up. They got to do something. You have to. You can't just sit the bench and do nothing.
Connor Garland gets into a fight last night with Brandon Tanev. I think it's one he wants back. He ate a lot of punches in that fight.
Well, his liver did.
Mm-hmm. Here's Connor Garland on why he chose to take it.
I just, thought, what the hell, and I try to just do something. We didn't really sustain offensive line in the first period. We weren't bringing much, so I felt we could do something. And, fortunately, I didn't take any, and didn't get hurt, so I felt fine.
We had gone a long way without hearing a do something.
Right. It's the kind of season it's been.
From J-Pat or from others. Do something is a phrase that gets invoked when they're doing nothing.
Yeah.
When things are going poorly.
That's why.
When you're asking for just the most debased, minimal thing to happen in your way.
That's why we used it so much over the past decade. A lot of something occurring.
Tocchet asking guys to do something. Garland figuring he'd do something. In the end, nothing to show for it on the scoreboard. You lose 5-2 to Seattle. And you've now lost 4 in a row going into this Boston game.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond that, everybody. Because the head coach whom we talked about it yesterday. We play an awful lot of his clips. He's a fantastic communicator. Both with fans, media, and players alike. We also think he has intentionally bit his tongue after several games over the course of the season. Really hasn't had a full-out go at the players since the Philadelphia game in the, second week of the season back in October. He had a spot last night. This was a spot.
He was in a mood.
Here's Rick Tocchet. He's concerned.
4-game losing streak, and it's like everybody keeps saying the good thing, adversity, but we got to start to pick it up here, and we guys got to understand that when the puck comes on our rim, we have a technique to do it, and you have to have the BALs to get the puck out. You can't just go in soft, and you can't ice pucks on a rim. Like, you got to be able to. There's a reason we practice and we talk about technique and things like that. And then when the pressure hits, you got to, those are where the reps that come into play. It shouldn't be foreign to you when pressure hits. And some things in our staples are foreign to us right now.
You got to have ballast is what he's spelling out there. That's like in a boat, a ballast.
The marine term.
Yeah. I think that's what he was spelling out. Kind of tailed off there at the end.
Much like a golfer or tennis player, right? You got to be able to rely on your technique.
Yes.
In the pressure moments.
I think that's what he was spelling.
And he was a little bit upset.
But this is the way he has described all these criticisms. I hope people are listening. When they lose back-to-back games and we point out a few foibles, people are like, oh, it's only back-to-back games. Listen to everything that we've heard from Rick Tocchet here. He's logged all that. He hasn't bothered exploding yet after those first couple of games, but he's logged it all. And now it comes out the past 4 or 5 games.
Yes.
We've had a handful of guys that are like, he's seen all the same stuff that you've seen, that we've seen after the first couple of games of these losses. But he's not going to outwardly air that laundry just yet. But when he's had enough, he's had enough. And he's pointed out, I saw that stuff too. And I saw that we haven't been good for 4 or 5 games now. And now he's willing to talk about it.
But that's why we say he picked a spot.
That's right.
Because you can't go after each and every one of these games.
As a coach, no.
And actually, I wonder if he picked the Seattle spot intentionally. I mean, the game certainly played out that way. He had a bit of a blow up after a Seattle loss last year. If he comes from the, remember he was a Flyer. If he comes from the school of that's our rival, we need a great effort here. We've got a bunch of fans who have come down and are in the building. Short flight home, so
mentor trip, all that stuff going on. I mean, I honestly,
I like the spot he picked.
I think it just has to do with that. Honestly, Matt, that's one of the worst games of the season. Like,
for sure,
it's top 4 of worst games of the season.
Awful.
And the Minnesota game is on that list too.
And he used some difficult terms in the post game last night, not just ballast,
which we think it is. Yeah.
when you go to no-shows, that's pretty strong from an NHL coach. Here's Coach Tocchet on no-shows.
Sometimes I have a lot to say. I don't have much to say. Just not much compete from the guys. That's on me. I got to take the blame for that. I didn't get the guys to compete hard enough, so I'll take the heat on this one. It was a lot of no-shows tonight.
Which is done with a bit of a wink and a nudge of, clearly I have to do something different because they're not going to do it on their own. And this is what I used to say about Alain Vigneault. It's why I earned the Baby Dragon moniker way back in the day. Is by the time 2010, 2011 rolls around, they've been through the playoff trenches a couple of times already. Like you shouldn't need to tell the Sedins and Ryan Kessler, hey, it's game time. You got to go out there and play hard. Like they were seasoned pros. You shouldn't need the speech. The game's about to start, guys. Are we ready? You shouldn't need to. And Rick Tocchet is sort of sarcastically saying, I think, with that comment of, I guess I need to do that because they're not going to do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Because they weren't ready.
Thought you were beyond this, son.
Yeah.
Disappointed that
he was
I
disappointed.
have to tell you to do the dishes.
Big game. Nip the 3-game losing streak in a bud.
You do the dishes every night after dinner. At least that's the ask here, son.
Mm.
And I've got to tell you here.
Yeah. On a Wednesday?
Yeah.
No.
He also mentioned 4 or 5 wingers. Did we hear a little bit of messaging upstairs? 12 in Rutherford? Still need a winger here? Still not good enough at that spot?
Well, I think
they have great rapport.
I don't think he needs to message to the media.
And I don't think he has to.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether the emotion got the best of him.
I think he's really frustrated at Ilya Mikheyev's play. I think he's
got a right to be.
I think he's a little bit frustrated maybe. And I think this one he's got a right to as well. I don't think it's a criticism, but I think he's frustrated maybe that Elias Lindholm hasn't been more plug and play. Which is not to denigrate Lindholm, but it's just it's taking some time to get comfortable, right?
This is why you go out and acquire the guy on January 31st, not March 8th.
Yeah.
To give yourself all those games, all those days to go through this patch and emerge on the other side. And I have full confidence they will with 20 plus games.
And we'll tell you in hashtags on the podcast side how the other half of that trade's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's got some frustrations. But I think ultimately, if he wants to say, guys, I need another winger, he'll make that call.
Yeah. And here's the other thing: he's practicing today.
Mm-hmm.
Played 3 and 4, and what was the longer term? Is it 7 and 10 or something like that?
10 in 17, I think. Too.
10 and 17, yeah, whatever it is. They've played 6 games in 90. He's practicing today at UBC. And he's practicing even with a 4 p.m. Saturday start. Because on Thursday night, and we'll hear the clip here in a second, it didn't sound like he was going to be able to practice with the early start on Saturday. But he's practicing.
Well,
which tells me that
they're in bed at midnight and they could sleep until 10. Those that don't have kids jumping on their bed, dad's home. They a chance for a really good night's sleep in their own bed. I don't feel terribly bad for them.
Here's Coach on gotta practice.
Yeah, I would love to practice for a week right now, but can't. This is a stretch that we knew, so we need some guys to buckle up, change a few things maybe off the ice, get some rest, and because this is not even close to like playoff hockey. I mean they were desperate, but if these guys think playoff hockey is that, we're in trouble. There's been a couple of games here where we need some guys to get going. I don't care what our record is. It's just been, it's been a little bit disturbing, some of the efforts from some of the guys right now.
And that's the big one. That was the big kahuna clip for me. You guys think that's playoff hockey? Like that to me was personal. That was a shot across the bow.
I would just like to note that we bookended that clip with practice, playoffs.
Yeah. Football
That was
legendary
somewhere
football.
in between the two all-time
Yeah.
press conferences, the Allen Iverson practice and the Jim Mora playoffs.
Yeah.
How about some players need to change some things off the ice?
That one stuck out like a sore thumb
Did
as
it
well.
ever.
Like, what is that referencing? What is that referencing? Like, that's honestly, your mind goes wild wondering what that's about. But he said it.
Well, and especially on the dad strip.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
nobody got wild and crazy with dad there, did they?
and like at the beginning of the season, that can be a shot about fitness level, but it's March.
Yeah.
You're fit now. I mean, you can't be
Well,
unfit
I just
at
wonder
this point.
if it's all part and parcel, Blake, of what we've talked about with him, that he first had to break them down. Basically let them know you're no stinking good.
Mhm.
You haven't accomplished shit.
Yeah.
So don't win 2 or 3 games and walk around town like you're Mr. Big Shot. Like that was one of the many things about the Canucks group of players that was immature, not ready for prime time. And again, we thought that was something that has already been corrected, but it looks like despite all the steps forward they've taken, because let's face it, more often than not, they've been ready to play. More often than not, you've seen great efforts from the Canucks. More often than not, you've seen the first goal from the Vancouver Canucks. And in fact, they've got the first goal last night. They got the first goal in Denver and Minnesota and against the Jets last night. So it's many steps forward and perhaps a couple back.
I think what I would take away from this, though, as a Canuck fan, is the coach sees everything that's wrong. Like, I would be really heartened in a lot of ways that Rick Tocchet has got his finger on the pulse, because him saying it, and these were his words, we're in trouble if guys think that that's playoff hockey. So, I mean, to me, that is a,
warning shot across the bow.
Yeah,
playoff inexperienced team,
and a possible indictment of a few players, and he says handful, that need to prove themselves, and we might see. It'll be interesting to track ice time over the next few games here to see who's really under the knuckle here of Rick Tocchet and who's got an abnormally low ice time. I'm going to guess those are the guys that he thinks aren't playoff ready at this point.
Then there's the power play.
And those are the best players.
Lost.
Like any power play with Quinn Hughes and right now an informed JT Miller should be able to muscle a couple of pucks across the line.
4 shots in 8 minutes.
Yeah, like, this doesn't even make any sense. And he, like, even, and the players come off the ice and they're saying the right things. Like, Quinn Hughes is his own worst critic at this point. And yet even he looks a little paralyzed out there. Like, you kind of almost want to look him back in the eye and say, yeah, but Quinn, you're an agent of that power play. You can facilitate some change. And yet they all just seem so stagnant and unwilling, unable to find that shooting lane.
Greg says, tell me I'm wrong. Canucks should acquire 2 $6 million a year 50-point getters with grit and send Paterson to float elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
I'll tell you you're wrong, Greg, but because you want superstars, you win with superstars in the NHL. Occasionally you get a team like the St. Louis Blues.
But the sentiment behind that is you're paying a $12 million player to be a difference maker.
Right.
Make a difference.
Exactly. And that part I also sympathize with Canucks.
And you know what?
That's the other part, because you're hearing these gigantic numbers around the player. A commitment unlike any the franchise has ever made, right? Potentially, if we're in the $90 to $100 million range on his deal. So you want to know that you're investing in someone who isn't just good on a Tuesday night against Columbus, but is good in a game 3 on the road when he's being hard line matched.
And after all this talk about meaningful games in March, remember that phrase? Meaningful games in March.
Right.
Well, they're going to play meaningful games in March. Are they ready for the meaningful games in March?
And the games in April are even more meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Saturday looms really large. It's we said this about the Colorado game. If they bounce back from the Minnesota game and beat Colorado, okay, sins are forgiven. Beating the Bruins won't absolve 4 straight losses, quite like the Colorado win would have. But you get yourself a lot of credibility back with not only your coach, obviously, but with your fans if you can bounce back and beat the Bruins.
Okay, so let me ask you this. As mentioned, Dallas loses in regulation to Ottawa on Thursday, and Toronto goes into Vegas and just destroys the Golden Knights, where Mark Stone with a spleen injury is going to be out for some time. Of course, Eichel wasn't playing this game either. Knights have lost 2 in a row, and Leafs have won 6 in a row. They are making easy work of some of these
Oilers' impression in the East.
Yeah. But Dallas didn't gain on you. Vegas didn't gain on you. At least not last night.
Mm-hmm.
Do you care about first overall in the President's Trophy and home ice in the Stanley Cup Final? No.
No, just the division is the main thing.
Division and conference.
Conference, ideally.
Yeah.
But if you settle for second in the conference, but you win the Pacific, I think you're still pretty okay with that.
Still 10 up on Vegas. They have 2 in hand. Still 4 up on Dallas. They have 1 in hand. 5 up on Colorado. They have 1 in hand as well too.
No, it's not all lost. The thing is you don't want to see what's happening with the power play to get from the micro to the macro, because when the power play gets to be in this much of a funk, it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. You go out expecting failure, you go out expecting oh man, and you're going to get oh man back, and you don't want that to expand to the games where you're starting every game going
not a game.
Oh, not a game,
no,
not the game you die for. You don't want to start every game thinking it's going to be a loss. And the more that a losing streak continues, the more you're at risk of that.
Should also mention Winnipeg, who have a stupid number of games in hand. 5 on the Canucks. They're down 7 points. So that's your ball game with regards to the Western Conference top seed. You're doing a Whitecaps kickoff event tonight, season ticket.
Yeah, the season ticket launch.
Wow.
So we'll talk to all the diehards.
Excellent.
Tonight at Canada Place. Looking forward to that.
And next week, the Whitecaps get going.
Yeah.
They do not participate in this opening weekend of MLS play.
No.
They participate next weekend with the home opener against Charlotte.
Yeah. And that should be very well attended. It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait for the season to get going.
Lastly here, we want to send our support to Kate Paterson, the Canucks reporter. Known Kate for a long time, worked Grey Cup radio with Kate for a number of years. Disappointing that she has to go through what she's going through with this online harassment, but there have been countless times during the course of this season where Kate has been the only reporter on the spot traveling with the Vancouver Canucks. And there have been a number of times, Blake, where you and I have been sitting in listening to Kate talk to Coach Tocchet or someone else and went, boy, good question. Boy, good follow-up. She's a hell of a pro. And I want to send her our support after what she tweeted last night.
Yeah.
Today's menu. Jeff Paterson's going to drop by. We'll do some hashtags, the best and worst to Twitter. Frank Saravelli on a very slow trade deadline. We thought that Monahan and Lindholm, okay.
Floodgates are open.
Skids are greased. Let's get going here. I believe even our buddy John Shannon said, I fear for those guys who have to do the big long show on the 8th. 2 weeks to go before trade deadline. Still some time, but some really small potatoes, rinky-dink stuff since Monahan was traded from Montreal to Winnipeg. So we'll get into that. We'll go to the people as well as we do on Fridays, hear from you on a number of Canucks topics.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Which part?
Well, I just think that there's not a lot of inventory to be traded in the NHL, so I just don't know that we should be looking forward to many trades.
And Frank will tell us something along those lines. I gotta say though,
you're intrigued enough.
Well, put it this way, like he's got 30 plus guys on its trade targets board.
And how many?
TSN has 50 guys on their board. Look, I realize, not to scoop Frank, but There are teams out there looking for difference makers. There's only so many difference makers.
They're going to be disappointed.
When those dominoes drop, then you'll see the next
Tier 2.
tier and next class of player go and onwards and onwards.
All right, let's get to Best Bets, a presentation of Sports Interaction, your homegrown sports book and casino. Matt, what do you have today?
Well, Bruins and Canucks Saturday from Rogers Arena. If you were thinking 2011 rematch or Stanley Cup preview, know that a specific Vancouver-Boston Stanley Cup final pays 34-1 right now, and it'll be less than that once teams start getting eliminated and we winnow and then set our postseason Stanley Cup playoff field. So if you like the rematch of 2011, if you think Boston and Vancouver, the two best teams in the league right now, can meet in the Cup final, 34-1, get on it now.
It is a pick'em kind of game. I think considering the Bruins have been scuffling a little bit, there's not a lot of confidence in either direction. But if you want to
bet the overtime,
no, I'm gonna do the hedge. I'm gonna do the hedge. Cheer on the Canucks all you want, but if you've got that cynical part of you, the Bruins -1.5 pays out of
win
3.
by 2.
Yeah, pays out of 3.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Don
saying.
Taylor special there.
Yeah.
Bet against your team.
Sports Interaction, your homegrown sports book and casino. Custom props and parlays you're not going to find anywhere else, speaking directly to a Vancouver sports fan. Plus, best-in-class casino, thousands of games and live dealers. Scan the code you see. You get a 200% welcome bonus from Sekeres and Price. It's all available at sportsinteraction.com. Must be 19 plus. Know your limit. Play with it.
J-Pat's next.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great. Rinkwide's Jeff Paterson is our guest, our Canucks reporter, who took in the proceedings at the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle last night. And Jeff, you were telling me Rick Tocchet wasn't just spitting fire post game, but he was visibly shaking. He was seismic in his anger about that game last night.
Yeah, and look, I'm not there. I go to a lot of the games, but I come back and I record Rinkwide. I'm not always there around the coach post game, and certainly not in a scrum format where you're literally rubbing elbows with him. Like, that was more my takeaway, was you could feel his anger in his body language as much as you could hear it in his words, and he was mad. And rightly so. They were terrible. You know, they played well against Winnipeg and lost. They played well in Denver and lost. That's going to happen. They played brutally in Seattle and lost. And that's where there is a line that, as a coach, and he tried to take some of it on himself and sort of take a couple of bullets for the team with the thing about not being prepared. I get it. I mean, that's from the coaching handbook, but this to me was more on the players than it was on the coach, although this power play thing is so out of control now, and you can see it's in their heads, and, every power play out was a different look, so they're just throwing stuff against the wall. But for all the talk in the lead up to the game about more shots, despite the formations, 4 shots in 8 minutes power play time, nothing to show for it, 1 for 28, and it is a disaster right now, and there's too much talent for it to be as bad as it is, but that was part of the problem. But the other thing, guys, is 4 straight losses. They've opened the scoring in all 4 of these games, and that's usually been the blueprint to success for the Canucks. So they're not getting bleached. They're not getting, teams aren't steamrolling them from the opening minute. It has been stay in games, and usually the formula has been get the saves you need, get the goals you need, your star players take over in crunch time, and that's not happening for the Vancouver Canucks right now.
Yeah. There was plenty within the rant, BALLS, no shows. What specifically stuck out to you, Jeff, in terms of the words?
Oh, do something. Come on. Like, he's stealing my material now. And honestly, like I had to stifle a bit of a laugh when he dropped that. I was like, "Hey," but trust me, those words were in my mind as I watched that game as well. Just about anytime anybody hopped over the boards, I was like, "Do something, somebody here." Because look at the goals they scored. Like JT Miller gets a fortunate bounce. Grubauer's lost his stick, and Sam Lafferty probably still hasn't seen that puck go in, but they count. But in terms of generating offense and actually creating scoring chances, like they didn't do anything against the Seattle Kraken. And Philip Grubauer, guys, that was his second game since December the 8th. Like, talk about a guy that hasn't played much. He is the backup. They got thrown a bone by Dave Haxtell of the Kraken. Like, Joey Daccord can't play every game, but Daccord has been a big part of the Kraken's resurgence. And they see a guy that probably has a little bit of rust on him. And they had 12 shots on goal through 2 periods. So, I mean, the do something thing certainly stood out, but just more about the fact that, I think, and he's used this line, or at least sort of gone down this path before, about if guys think this is playoff hockey, if they think this is tough.
That one. Yeah.
And he's so right. A game in February against Seattle, that's not playoff hockey. Like, the Kraken are desperate. I get that. And credit to them. They were able to play their game. But yeah, I mean, the stakes are going to get significantly higher. And for the first time all year, even through 3 straight losses, I was like, they played reasonably well and lost. You can live with that. But 4 straight losses, like, that can quickly become 5-6. And you've seen teams in the East have now caught them in points and points percentage. They're a little bit fortunate right now that everybody else around the top of the West is kind of scuffling. And so teams aren't making up a ton of ground on them in the West and in the Pacific, but you are opening the door to some of those teams closing the gap and working their way closer to the Vancouver Canucks, unless they get this turned around and figure it out. And that's at the feet of their best players. And I think, and again, Tocchet didn't name names, but it's pretty clear, Elias Pettersson hasn't been great. Elias Lindholm really hasn't been great, other than the 2 games in which he scored. And Brock Besser has gone into hiding, which is unfortunate because he's had such an incredible season, but 1 goal since the All-Star break. And that came in that 3rd period when everybody was scoring in Minnesota the other day.
They've won periods lately, but I don't think we've seen them dominate anybody. And I'm even going back to even pre-All-Star break. I don't know if there's been many moments where they have looked like a first-place overall team that just said to somebody else in opposition, you can't stick with us. You just can't hang with us. We haven't seen that at all. And you look around and other teams do that. Like even in a close game, I was watching the end of that Bruins-Oilers game, and David Pastrnak was just like, nope, we are not letting this game slip away after our lead. And he just willed his team and just sniped a goal from the top of the circles that, few people in the league can do. Like, where's that moment from the Canucks over? And again, I'm talking a wide sample size here. Give them the last 3 weeks. I don't know there's many opportunities or many, games to point to where they just look like a first overall team. Sorry, you're not in the same league as us.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think you go back to that barnstorming road trip through New Jersey, New York, the Islanders, and Pittsburgh, where, and the Lotto line was doing a lot of the damage then, but they were bullying good opponents and just get out of our way. You're not stopping us. And we haven't seen that. Like, they came off that road trip. They went 4-0-1 in the 5-game homestand that led to the All-Star break, but they didn't play great there. Remember, they let the Leafs off the hook. They kind of scuffled to beat Chicago and Arizona. They had the St. Louis and then the Columbus comeback. So you're right, like complete games start to finish, they've been hard to find for the Vancouver Canucks. And again, that goes back to this idea that, they're not giving up the first goal and chasing. They're getting leads, but they're not able to do anything with it. And so outside of JT Miller right now, nobody's going. And so your point is well taken about Pastrnak. Like, Nathan McKinnon didn't dominate the game, but he had 10 shots the other night for the Colorado Avalanche. Mark Scheifele had 4 points against the Canucks. Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek each had 6 points in Minnesota. Jared McCann had 4 points last night in Seattle. So, they're letting other teams' best players take over, and their best players aren't matching right now. And that's the disappointment, I think, for Rick Tocchet, for the fan base. And, just watching with my own eyes in person last night, like, where is the investment? Like, you get out of the first period in a 1-1 tie, you haven't played well, but like that should be sort of the alarm bells right there to hit the reset button and be a whole lot better. And they just didn't dig in at all against the Kraken. And once they fell behind, I know they tied it at 2 with the lucky bounce, but, look what happened. Like that 4-2 goal, lose a faceoff cleanly. And then just standing around like Rick Tocchet and all of his staples, you're not going to win defending like that. You can't. And yet we've seen too many examples of that of late from the Vancouver Canucks, who right now do not resemble that team that rolled through the New York area a month ago.
You made reference to the Hughes post-game comment about bringing other people that will work on the, like, is that just him throwing out like a catchphrase? Are we reading too much into it? Because it sounded like he knew the guys were in the hopper, in the on-deck circle, ready to come in here. And there's only one Phil Kessel.
I found a little bit of levity in that moment. I'm not really sure what he meant, but yes, this idea that if the guys that are here can't get it done, the Canucks are going to somehow find it. Like, does Phil Kessel have friends with him on this little trip into Abbotsford? Is there a behind door number 2 somewhere? No, it's on their best players. And, again, like, I put it at the feet of the players, but I do think the coaches ultimately make the decisions. It was curious at the very least to see the first power play of the night, and your leading goal scorer and leading power play goal scorer, Brock Besser, isn't on power play 1 to accommodate Philip Hronek, who was supposed to shoot the puck, and he didn't shoot the puck. And then the next time out, Besser was there, but Lindholm wasn't. And by the 4th power play, this idea of Hronek blasting shots, Hronek wasn't on either power play, first unit or second unit. And that's where I say they're just throwing stuff at the wall right now and hoping something sticks. The problem there is, guys, like, one power play goal doesn't cure all. One power play goal might help them in a game somewhere, but the next time they score a power play goal, like, that doesn't put an end to this discussion. They've got to find just authoritative looks, be ruthless. Like, what happened to that group that before the All-Star break and for much of the early part of the season, they were relentless on the power play, and right now it's just so passive, so static, and again, you can just feel it's in their head. There's no doubt about that.
Maybe Quinn Hughes is being consulted on trade deadline targets.
Maybe.
Just putting it out there. He is the captain now, of course. Here's the other thing. As much as Rick Tocchet's words might have been hard to hear and landed with some authority, I'm going to guess that there was a Canuck or two who got it even worse from a dad. After going 0 for 3 on the dad's trip, Jeff, and you were telling us, sadly, it wasn't a full complement of dads on this trip. There were some missing father figures.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, and I think this is the right way to do it, and we're seeing this around the league. They're framing it as fathers. They call it the mentors trip, right? Like, first of all, not everybody has a father. We know Brock Besser and his family story there, and I think there are some others that have lost their dads. There are some that come from blended families. Like, I think Sam Lafferty had his stepdad on this trip. Others had brothers there. So, it's not simply every player and his dad, because there are family dynamics at play. So I like the idea of it, calling it a mentor's trip. Whatever the case, yeah, I mean, look, guys want to perform for their dads, and they did in Colorado. Again, the effort in Colorado was fine. They lost to a good Colorado team in the 3rd period. Last night was a letdown. And, I do think it bears mentioning at the very least, guys, that this was their 10th game in 17 days coming out of the All-Star break, 8 of those 10 on the road. Like, that's just a massive ask. That's not me trying to make any excuse or be an apologist. That's just a lot for professional athletes. And if you think back to November, they had a similar 10-game and 17-day stretch. They lost in San Jose in the 10th game. Like, it just shows you that it doesn't matter who you're playing. By the time you get to 10 games and 17 nights with a bunch of travel, you don't have much left in the tank. And so I do think that was part of the storyline. Now, I'm sure the Canuck organization was hoping having the dads around would, boost them. They had the day off in Seattle on Wednesday, a little bit of energy. It was interesting too, though, because they've had this tough condensed schedule. There has been next to no practice time. Like, a guy like Elias Lindholm has come in and had to learn on the fly. And so I think you do have to cut him a little bit of slack in that regard. I know he's a pro and a veteran, but this is new to him still. And so now it's this catch-22 of, when you get some time off, like, do you just let the guys have days off to recover and recoup, or do you try to drill down to put an end to this 4-game losing streak? So the dads will scatter. They'll go their separate ways. And, yeah, it's a little unfortunate that they had to witness this one in person. It was kind of fun to watch them during the morning skate in Seattle, all decked out wearing their uniforms, the kids' uniforms, to the morning skate, not just the game. So they were all in, certainly. And, I'm sure they appreciated the opportunity. You guys had Brent and Demko on, listening to Doug Cole, Ian's dad, on the telecast the other day as well. Look, this is a fleeting opportunity. Like, even for the guys that are in their 20s, careers are short. And so I think that the dads value it. And I have to imagine the players absolutely in a long season get a kick and maybe a little bit of energy out of having dad or a mentor along for the ride.
Well, Mr. Demko said he was going to stick around for Boston, and I wonder if he's not alone. I wonder if there's a few sticking around, and it might be a chance for redemption for the dads.
No Mr. Pettersson on the.
That was my understanding. When I saw the photo they had all the players and the dads. I didn't see Elias Pettersson's dad. And I know what he looks like. I don't know what all the dads look like, but I certainly would recognize Elias Pettersson's dad. Somebody told me that because they fly on the team charter and there are manifests and logs that are filled out, the dads all had to fly back to Vancouver before they were able to.
Right.
So I think a lot of them would stick around. I mean, the Boston Bruins and the Canucks come on a Saturday. Yeah. So the dad's trip, the trip part is over, but the dad's part, maybe not so much yet because the Canucks are at home now for 3 in a row. So probably
I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving
until I get a win.
Exactly. I would also bet there were a couple of dads. I'm not leaving until I see a better effort, son. We are not parting company on that Seattle effort.
There's a 12:30 Canucks practice conducted by Rick Tocchet today at UBC. There's a 2:30 practice. The dads, they're going to put the players through their paces.
Jim Hughes is out there finding ice right now. We are bag skating at 2:30, gentlemen.
Yeah, Coquitlam Planet Ice.
Exactly.
Third sheet.
Bring your skates. You won't need a stick.
Oh, man.
Let's ask you the poll. What's more upsetting about Elias lately, the play or the unwillingness to sign the contract, or are you totally unbothered by Elias these days, Jeff?
No, look, he's well within his rights to sign when he wants to sign. So I've sort of put the contract aside. I think it's just more about him getting back to being a star level player. And he has been quiet, as a bunch of them have, since the All-Star break. And I guess I hope that the arrival of Elias Lindholm was going to bring out the best in both of them. And there just really hasn't been that chemistry yet. There have been some moments along the way. But Paterson, 2 goals since the All-Star break. And he's got some points. But I think 6 of his points came in 2 games against the Detroit Red Wings. So it's kind of been feast or famine in that regard for him. I think the other thing, too, is, and look, I get that he's a hot button issue and there's a bit of a flashpoint there with him. People have to understand, though, that even in a quiet stretch here, if he has back-to-back 100-point seasons, the market is set. Like, it is what it is. He's getting his money. The Canucks have a decision to make there if they want to be the ones to pay it ultimately. But you can't negotiate because he had a slow month of February and say, well, now you're only worth $9 million. It doesn't work that way. The market is what the market is for star players that have back-to-back 100-point seasons. Those guys get paid. And so, again, I hope that there's an uptick in his performance, his production, and certainly, the scrutiny is going to come at playoff time, and he has to deliver he is such a huge part of this team's success. He was early on. He's gone quiet. The team's gone quiet. I mean, there's a correlation there without a doubt. So, the contract thing to me is now a little bit on the back burner just because I think we all have come to understand that it's not like now, the trade deadline can be a bit of a pressure point and there's other decisions that have to be made by the organization. I get all of that, but just in the here and now and for the poll question, to me, it's just his performance when other teams' top players are starting to torch the Canucks. I want to see some guys wearing Canuck uniforms match that. And JT Miller's been productive. He's got 8 goals since, only Austin Matthews has scored more goals coming out of the All-Star break league-wide. And we're talking about Austin Matthews. So JT Miller is holding his own, but they need some other guys. And that's where it comes back to Paterson.
And here's the other thing. Jeff is absolutely right about a slow month of February not affecting the price. Here's the other thing. Even if he were to have a terrible playoffs, like if the Canucks were to land with a thud in the playoffs out early, stars not being stars, and let's face it, wouldn't be the first young team to suffer that playoff fate. That might affect the Canucks' view of him. It's not going to affect his compensation.
The price.
Because others will pay it. All it takes is one, and there will be 31 teams salivating over his availability if it comes to that.
Yeah.
Right. And if he had a sluggish second half of the season, he's still going to get 100 points. I think unless the bottom completely fell out, and that's where I say the die is cast for guys that put back-to-back seasons together. You might be able to nickel and dime a couple of $100,000 maybe, but everybody's slotted. I mean, that's just the way the open market works in the National Hockey League. And so you may not agree that he's a $12 million or $12.5 million player, but that's what the market is going to bear. And that's where it comes back to this idea. The Canucks then have a decision. Do they want to shell out that kind of money for this player, or do they want to see what that kind of player could, return them in some sort of trade?
The one price I think that can get affected with a slow finish to the season, and that includes the playoffs, is if they are forced to trade him. I think you might get a little less for that player.
I don't know
if he's not rising to the occasion.
I still think it's a very robust market.
But if you don't believe he's a different, like we're seeing, like full credit to JT Miller. Like JT Miller's rising to the occasion here.
I'm just saying, to Jeff's point, if he's a 2-time 100-point player, that'll be good enough for a lot of GMs, coaches.
Well, no one's doubting that player adds to your team. Mm-hmm. But again, is he the guy that you can lean on? If he doesn't prove himself to be the guy that you can lean on, then he's your number 2 on a team,
and
you're number 1.
You're absolutely right. But in markets like Ottawa and Columbus and Buffalo, like it's just, hey, we got this player. That's good enough, right? Like they just need some upward mobility, some momentum in their operations. Jeff, it's a 4:00 start against the Boston Bruins. Bruins get the Leafs treatment here
seriously,
on a Saturday night. I got to say, I'm a little off put by that. I don't mind the earlier starts on the Saturday. In fact, depending on the weather, in some cases, I prefer them.
I like them, yeah.
But they're getting the Leafs treatment round here.
Right, and I've seen some outrage already. I push back with, do you know what the Canucks' record is against the Leafs at Rogers Arena over the last 15 years? It's like 13-2. Like the Canucks have absolutely feasted on the Toronto Maple Leafs in this 4:00 window. Here's the thing that I haven't been able to get to the bottom of. Hockey Night in Canada has the Toronto Maple Leafs at Colorado at 4:00 on Saturday. Like marquee matchups don't come a whole lot more. Austin Matthews and Nathan McKinnon for a national audience. Like, what are we doing here? Putting the Canucks and the Bruins sort of on another channel up against that. Like, there are lots of weeks where you look at the Hockey Night matchup and you think, couldn't they have done better with the schedule? Well, here you got the Avs and the Leafs, and you get the Canucks and the Bruins. So I don't know why this is a 4:00 start, but it's a quick turnaround for the Vancouver Canucks. The Bruins are coming off back-to-back games in Alberta, one in Edmonton, lost in overtime, so they've been to OT the last couple of games. Look, the Bruins fed the Canucks in Boston 2 weeks ago. That's going to be fresh in the Canucks' minds. We know Canuck fans never forget that kind of the thing. So 2011 probably doesn't resonate with a lot of the current Canucks, although we were talking on Rinkwide last night that, Archie Baines, he certainly would know the story there. But otherwise, it's just, it's going to be added emotion, energy in the building, because Canuck fans don't forget. A win over Boston obviously ends the losing streak. I don't know that cures all, but boy, if you think there's angst right now, they fall to the Boston Bruins on Saturday.
Oh boy, for 5 in a row. Whoa.
We got a show on Monday.
Yeah, we sure do. And you'll be in for Blake on Monday. Have a great Rinkwide. We'll be listening Saturday, and we'll see you here in studio next week.
Yes, I have to hit the highway and make it home from. I came a long way to watch that last night.
You did. Happy travels.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.